Welcome to Time Traveling Team, the weekly podcast where we review every story of Doctor Who right from the very beginning. I'm Paddy.
And I'm Tricia. This week we close off season 10 and say goodbye to Joe Grant in The Green Death. We'll be discussing the Doctor, the companions, and the villains, and give our thoughts on the story as a whole.
We'd also love to hear your thoughts on this story, so in order to join in the discussion, you can check us out at Time Teamp, that's TIMETEAMP, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, or you can email us at timetravelingteam@teamproductions.com. So, as always, I will start off with the... No, wait, am I being interrupted?
As I say, two things before we jump into the recap. Thing number
Right.
one, I would like to apologise to our listeners for the slight dip in my audio quality. I am not at home and do not have my normal equipment. Thing number two, I am in my mother's house, which means my mother watched this story with me. So throughout the discussion, there may be random comments from Tricia's mum.
Oh, and that's always so exciting. It is
And
always
she
so
has
exciting.
given her a score out of 5, so in the overall, we can include Mam's score as well.
Cool. Fair enough. So, right, with that in mind, I will do the story recap.
There you go.
And actually, sorry, before I start the recap, to our Welsh listeners, there's a couple of Welsh pronunciations in this episode, so I apologise if I brutalise them. Episode 1. At the closed down Llanfairfac coal mine in South Wales, a terrified miner makes his way through the tunnels. He makes his way to a lift that goes back up to the surface, but as he is going up, he notices his hands have begun to glow green. Meanwhile, at the nearby Global Chemical Research Centre, the head of the centre, Dr. Stevens, addresses an assembled crowd of disgruntled miners who worked at the closed mine. Despite their protest, he tells them that the coal industry is dying and is to be replaced with the lucrative oil industry, and he sways the crowd by telling them that they all stand to make more money from it. The meeting is also attended by a protest group led by Professor Clifford Jones, a renowned Nobel Prize winner specialising in environmental science. Jones tries to convince the workers that the implementation of oil drilling in the area will damage the local environment and put the health of the workers and their families at risk. The workers shout him down, but Stevens tries to calm the crowd down again, but he's interrupted by the sound of a shift whistle coming from the mine. Unbeknownst to the crowd, who are making their way to the mine, the sounding of the whistle was the last act of the terrified miner, whose entire body now glows green. The workers and Professor Jones arrive and find the body, and one of them, Evans, asks Professor Jones if he knows what the cause of death is. He says that the soft green glow is reminiscent of a body in a state of several weeks of putrefaction. At the Doctor's lab at Unit HQ, the Doctor is tinkering with the space-time coordinate programmer and avoiding crumbs as Jo speaks to him through mouthfuls of her breakfast. She begins reading an article in the paper about the protests in Llanfairfac, but the Doctor is only half listening and assumes she is talking about their impending journey to Metebelis Tree. They finally get on the same page when Jo prepares a bag to go to Llanfairfac. The Brigadier arrives at the lab and reports the death of the miner to the Doctor, who is reluctant to go investigate. The Brigadier says that UNIT needs to investigate as any sign of sabotage could have international ramifications. Jo enters, finishing her preparations to leave, but when the Brigadier begins to issue her an order to take part in the investigation, she cuts across him without letting him speak, saying that he would have to lock her up to stop her. The Doctor comes out of the TARDIS, asking Jo if she is ready to leave, but she gives both of them a lecture about the environmental dangers caused by plants like the one at Global Chemicals. The Brigadier recognises her speech as being reminiscent of one of the ones that Professor Jones has made in the past, and offers to give her a lift to the site, as he says that he will be going there as well. The Doctor says he still intends to go to Metebelis Tree, and once they are alone, he asks Jo to join him. She sadly declines and says that she has to go as she believes in Professor Jones's cause, as he reminds her of a younger version of the Doctor. The Doctor sadly lets her go, but tells her to let the Brigadier know he will follow them later. After she leaves, he comments sadly on Jo's metaphorical coming of age, and he takes off in the TARDIS. Later, the Brigadier drops Jo off at the compound where Professor Jones and his followers, who call themselves the Whole Wheel Community, have set up base. He voices his disapproval of both Jo and the Doctor's actions during a potential time of crisis. At that moment, the Doctor lands in the blue world of Metebelis Tree, but while he is taking in the sights, he is suddenly grabbed by a segmented, hairy tentacle as screeching sounds fill the air. At the Whole Wheel compound, Jo enters the house, but no one answers her. She hears music coming from a room with a sign saying, "Watch it, Toadstool Professors" on it, and enters where she encounters Professor Jones. He angrily tells her to shut the door, and then goes to examine a batch of spores to make sure that they haven't been affected by the temperature change. Jo is taken aback by his gruff demeanour, and demands to be introduced to Professor Jones. Seemingly enjoying her defiant demeanor, he makes her sit in a chair as she continually bumps into things or knocks stuff over. She sits in a huff, and after a while, he plays a practical joke on her, which seemingly breaks the frosty air between them. He then shows her the spores he was working on and explains that they have been cultivating a strain of high protein fungus to replace the need for meat. He says that the whole point of the compound was to act as an environmentally self sustaining research institute, which makes Joe realize that he is Professor Jones. Meanwhile, the Brigadier has gone to meet Dr. Stevens and informs him that while units will keep their research centre safe, he also intends to investigate the death of the miner. He asks to use a phone so he can call the doctor, and Stevens gets his aide Elgin to help him. At that moment, the doctor is desperately trying to evade the creature hunting him down as he makes his way through the nightmarish landscape. He comes across a large crystalline mound, but is forced to take cover as a monstrous flying creature attacks him. Getting no answer, the Brigadier hangs up and asks for more information on Professor Jones and his protest. Stevens replies that Jones and his followers are convinced that his methods of oil refinery are harmful to the environment, but he claims that they are actually producing no waste or pollution. As they are talking, Professor Jones is telling Joe that he believes the waste produced is actually being sent to the closed mine. Joe suggests that they go investigate, but she goes herself after he patronizingly tells her that he has work to do. Stevens asks the Brigadier to seal off the mine, but the Brigadier says he intends to investigate it with the Doctor and asks for the call to be put through again. On Metebelis Tree, the Doctor rushes back to the TARDIS, avoiding hurled rocks, spears, and flaying tentacles, and flies back to the lab where he answers the phone. A short while later, he takes Bessie to Clan Fairfax. The Brigadier goes to meet him when he arrives, and after he leaves, Stevens calls him one of his men, Hinks. He suddenly grows distracted as if listening to something, and then tells Hinks to ensure that no one enters the mine. He goes back to normal after Hinks leaves, and once he is alone, he puts on a strange headset from a hidden compartment which sends him into a trance. At the mine, Joe enters the lift building where two of the miners, Dave and Bert, are after sending Evans down so he could investigate the death of his colleague. The duo tell her to leave, but a call comes through from Evans, who begs for help as his hands have begun to glow green. Joe offers to go with Bert to help Evans, citing her first aid training, and the miners agree. Dave sends the duo down into the mine, but the Doctor and the Brigadier arrive and order him to stop the lift. However, he panickingly tells them that the brake isn't working as the lift plummets down into the mine. Episode 2. The Doctor rushes to the cable wheel of the lift and uses a metal pole to try and stop the wires. However, the gap is too narrow and he only succeeds in slightly slowing the descent of the lift. The Brigadier goes to help him add more weight to the pole, and the Doctor tells Dave to reverse the lift, but when Dave says the cable could snap, he tells him to do it anyway. Through their efforts, they manage to stop the lift's descent just before it slams into the bottom of the shaft. In the lift, a groggy Joe and Bert get to their feet and see that they are still about 20 feet from the bottom. Bert says that they had better climb down as the cables could snap at any minute, and he agrees to go first at Joe's request. When they reach the bottom, they try to call up to the top, but the phone line is cut. They hear moaning from nearby and see Evans on the floor with more of his body glowing green. Up at the top, the Brigadier asks Bert if they could use the counterweight shaft to rescue the duo, but Bert says it will be jammed as a result of the other shaft being blocked. The Doctor suggests rigging a pulley system, but Bert says that the only available cutting equipment is at Global Chemicals. They call through to Elgin, but the line goes dead as Stevens remotely disconnects and engages the incoming phone lines. Bert suggests calling to the whole wheel compound to see if they have anything, and they get through to Professor Jones, who says he doesn't have any cutting equipment, but volunteers to come help rescue Joe. At Global Chemicals, Stevens tries to coerce one of his scientists, Fell, to help him stop any investigations into the mine, but he refuses. When he tries to leave, he is blocked by Hinks, and they suddenly hear a voice call out to Stevens. They look and see a computer screen which shows a voice pattern on it. The voice orders Stevens to process him, and when asked who the voice belongs to, Stevens says it is their boss. Fell is sent for processing and returns in an automaton-like state when the Brigadier arrives requesting the cutting equipment. He says that their cutting equipment was taken away to be replaced by upgraded equipment which has not yet arrived. Stevens shows the Brigadier out, and after they leave, Elgin confronts Fell about the cutting equipment and Stevens' odd behaviour surrounding the issues in the mines. He is confused when Fell says that his comments will be reported to Stevens. Outside, the Brigadier calls back to Unit HQ for Yates. Back at the mine, the Doctor reveals to Dave and the newly arrived Jones that he has found a piece of brake linkage on the floor and says it was sabotaged. The Brigadier arrives with the news of the cutting equipment, but Dave is skeptical as it was only used recently for a different job. The brigadier says that they will have to go to the nearest town to see if they have any, and Dave offers to go with him. The doctor, finally realizing who Jones is and expressing admiration for his scientific acumen, suggests that they go to the global chemicals themselves to investigate it. Down in the shaft, Bert does his best to keep Joe's spirits up as she is worried about Evan's deteriorating condition and the possible presence of whatever it was that affected him. Bert says that there may be a way out via an emergency shaft that was cut to rescue some other trapped miners in the past, and he helps lead Joe off towards it. At Global Chemicals, Jones and the rest of the Whole Wheel community approach the front gates, making a loud fanfare. All the security is summoned to the front, which allows the doctor to gain access to the rear of the complex via a cherry picker. However, his presence is noticed by the security system, which transmits the information to Stevens and Boss. Boss tells Stevens to wait to see what the doctor does first before taking any action. As they watch him make his way towards the storage sheds, Boss orders him to be apprehended, and he is caught by Hinks and some security personnel. However, he easily beats them using Venusian Aikido and flees when he sees guards with rifles approaching, but when he enters a pipe house, steel bars close the entrance, trapping him inside. Stevens introduces himself and asks the doctor what he is doing there. The doctor demands to be given the cutting equipment, and Stephen guides him to the empty storage shed before having Hinks take him away. Unbeknownst to them, they are being watched by a curious Elgin. Later, the Brigadier and Dave arrive back with some cutting equipment and enter to find the Doctor and Jones working on calculations. The Brigadier says that he will go down into the shaft, but Dave says that it is his responsibility and allows the Doctor to go with him when he asks. Back in the shaft, Joe, who's unused to the confined and stuffy environment, struggles to follow Bert as he guides her through the tunnels. They eventually take a rest, and Bert says that they are nearly at the emergency shaft. Bert turns off their lamps on their helmets to conserve the battery, and Joe points out the bright green glow in the area, as well as the foul smell. They see slime trickling down the wall, and Bert touches it as Joe is warning him to be careful, and he says that it burns to touch. The Doctor, Dave, and a few other miners reach the bottom of the shaft and come across Evans's body, which the Doctor warns them not to touch. They find a note left by Joe which contains a map of the mine tunnels. Dave tells the others to take Evan's body back up whilst he goes with the Doctor to find Joe and Bert. In the tunnels, Joe drags Bert to an emergency shaft, but he is too weak to continue, and they notice his hand beginning to glow green. He tells Joe to go on ahead and bring back help, and she reluctantly goes. He is soon found by the Doctor and Dave. The Doctor tells Dave to take Bert back to the lift and inform the Brigadier that he is not to send anyone else down the shaft until he comes back with Joe. The Doctor makes his way down through the tunnel, calling out for Joe, who calls him down to her. Once there, she shows him a pool of green slime filled with hundreds of maggots about the size of small dogs. They start to go back through the tunnel, but a section of it caves in, and several maggots larger than those in the pool emerge from the hole, and they begin to advance on the Doctor and Joe. Episode 3. The Doctor and Joe run from the approaching maggots, but reach a dead end. Joe begins to panic that they are trapped, but the Doctor tells her not to panic and focus on trying to find a way out, telling her to be careful of what she touches. They find an overturned coal cart and put it back on its rails. They climb into it, and the Doctor finds a couple of beams, handing one to Joe so they can use them like ponting poles. Joe is reluctant to push the cart through the slime due to being unnerved by the maggots, but the Doctor tells her to keep her eyes closed as they go along the rails. Back in the lift room, Dave despairs as Bert is taken away in an ambulance, but Jones tells him that it is not his fault and that they should blame Global Chemicals instead. Jones says that they should go down to rescue Joe and the Doctor, but Dave refuses, citing the Doctor's instructions. Jones says that they need to rescue Joe, but the Brigadier arrives and tells him not to underestimate her and the Doctor. Jones tries to force the issue, but the Brigadier tells him that he cares about them just as much, but trusts in their abilities. However, he does say that he intends to visit Global Chemicals again. At Global Chemicals, Elgin confronts Fell with the fact of Evan's death and Bert's critical status. Fell momentarily seems confused, but Boss's control over him reasserts itself and he ignores Elgin. He goes into a pump control room, but a few moments later, Elgin sneaks in after him and hides as he observes him. In Stevens' office, the Brigadier arrives and informs Stevens that he is launching a full-scale investigation into the recent events, citing unit jurisdiction. Stevens objects, saying that the investigation could put his project at risk, but the Brigadier says that the risks to the lives of the Doctor and Joe is greater. Stevens then threatens him by placing a call to the Minister of Ecology. Down in the mine, the Doctor and Joe successfully get through the maggot-filled pool and enter a side cave. The doctor says that there is a crevice marked on the map, and he thinks it leads to the surface, and they begin to climb up it. They come to a sudden halt when Joe spots several large eggs, and the doctor takes one for analysis before resuming the climb to the surface. They eventually find a pipe that seems to be a waste pipe for crude oil, and they begin to climb up it, believing it will lead out at the global chemicals complex. Inside the pump control room, Elgin emerges and confronts Fell over his strange behavior, noticing that he is pumping waste into a secret storage container. However, an alarm sounds and a video feed shows the doctor and Joe in the pipe. Fell then says that the waste removal process is finished and that the waste will flow into the pipe, which Elgin says will kill them. Elgin tries to get him to open a nearby emergency bulkhead that will let them out, but Fell struggles with Boss's control. He manages to break free long enough to tell Elgin how to open the bulkhead, and he opens it, allowing the doctor and Joe to climb through moments before the waste floods the pipe. They tell Elgin about the maggots, and as they are talking, Fell leaves the room. Elgin offers to help them, and the doctor asks if he can sneak them out of the complex. In Stevens' office, the Brigadier comes off the phone with the Minister of Ecology and the Prime Minister, both of whom tell him to place himself and his men under Stevens' control, citing an article within the unit charter. Stevens offers to set up an office for him to work from, but the Brigadier says his own staff are en route, and he then leaves to find out if there is any news about the Doctor and Joe. A few moments later, Fell enters the office and says that he has a headache and asks for help. Stephen puts the strange headset on him, but after a few moments, Boss says that the processing was a failure and orders Stevens to make him self-destruct, which he reluctantly does. Fell then gets up out of his chair and runs from the office, passing Elgin and the others in the corridor, before opening an exterior door and jumping to his death. Later, at the Whole Wheel compound, Jones treats the Doctor and Joe and the Brigadier to a dinner made from their own produce. The Brigadier is impressed by the skills of the members of the compound and their research goals. The Doctor is called to the telephone, and Jones says that he is embarking on an expedition to the Amazon soon as part of his fungus research, which intrigues Joe. The Doctor returns and sadly announces that Bert has passed away. Jones comforts the saddened Joe as the Doctor says that they should start examining the egg to find out what caused the deaths. Unbeknownst to them, Hinks is making Stevens aware of the egg after overhearing one of the locals talking about it. Stephen then sends him to retrieve it from the compound. Meanwhile, Joe is devastated over the loss of Bert, saying that she could have been able to help him if she stayed. Jones comforts her and they nearly kiss, but they stop when they hear that the Brigadier and the Doctor are approaching. The Brigadier wishes them a good night as he is staying at the local pub, and Jones sees him out. The Doctor tells Joe to get a good night's rest and shows her the blue crystal he took from Metebelis' tree. However, she seems more engrossed in a book Jones has on the Amazon and distractedly comments on it. The Doctor is a bit put out by this, and when Jones returns, he takes him away with him to discuss the egg rather than leave him with Joe. However, the egg hatches and a maggot emerges, which makes its way out of the lab and approaches a completely unaware Joe. Episode 4. Hinks sneaks into the room behind Joe and is attacked by the maggot, which bites him on the wrist before crawling away. Hinks cries out in pain, and Joe's calls bring the Doctor and Jones running into the room, and Joe tells them what happened. Nancy, the compound's co-leader, and another member of the compound go to track down the maggot whilst the Doctor and Joe examines Hinks. Jones goes to call an ambulance and the Brigadier, and a short while later, Nancy returns saying that the maggot's slime trail has vanished. The following morning, the local milkman arrives at the compound and informs the members that he has just come from the mine and has seen unit troops preparing to blow it up. The information is relayed to the Doctor and Jones, who are running an experiment on the slime trail from the maggot, and they discover that the cells in the slime attack the human body like a virus. Nancy comes on and informs them about Unit's presence at the mine, and the Doctor rushes there with Joe and Jones to stop it. The Brigadier says that he is under orders to deal with the situation, and after repeated requests, he gives the Doctor a little over 30 minutes to convince Stevens not to blow up the mine. However, Stevens refuses to pay heed to the Doctor's words, saying that he is a fraud and that the maggots don't exist. He then brings in a delegate from the Ministry of Ecology, who turns out to be Yates, who pretends not to know the Doctor. The two then get into an argument over the course of action being taken, but Yates says that they have no other choice, and in the distance they hear the explosion. The Doctor leaves in disgust, and Stevens warns him not to return. Stevens then has Elgin show Yates his temporary office, and after they leave, Boss tells Stevens that they need to tread carefully going forward, as their goal is nearing completion. Back at the Whole Wheel compound, the Doctor reveals the presence of Yates to the others, and the Brigadier reveals that Yates is there undercover so he can investigate the complex. The Doctor still wishes that he didn't blow up the mine, but the Brigadier says the problem is solved as the maggots are now trapped inside. However, At Global Chemicals, a cleaning lady sees the maggots coming up one of the waste pipes and she reports it to a passing Elgin. Elgin goes to tell it to Stevens, who seems very blasé about the whole situation and says that they can force them back down by pumping more waste into the mine. Elgin is disgusted by his attitude, but when he tries to leave, Stevens closes the door and forces him to sit down so he can put the headset on him. Meanwhile, out in the coalfields near the mine, maggots have started to burrow through out of the ground, and Benton sets up a security perimeter around the area. The brigadier informs the doctor, who goes to join him, and he watches as both regular and armor-piercing bullets prove to be ineffective against the hardened shells of the maggots. Benton reports that the pesticide sprays they are using prove also to be useless, and the doctor says that they will need to find a biological countermeasure. Realizing that the maggots are too dangerous to try and get a sample from, the doctor asks the brigadier to try and get a sample of the oil waste from the complex instead. The brigadier calls Yates to arrange it, but Yates reveals through coded phrasing that he is being watched and security in the complex is doubled. However, the doctor enters the complex disguised as a milkman. Later, the security system picks him up and he is forced to go into a cleaning cupboard to hide. In Jones's lab, he and Joe continue to bond as she helps him with his experiments, echoing her first meeting with the doctor. Jones prepares to ask her a question, but in her excitement, she accidentally knocks over a jar of his fungus samples onto the slides he was about to examine. Joe realizes that they need a maggot sample, but when Jones tells her to make some coffee and doesn't pay attention to her afterwards, she writes a note and then leaves. After she leaves, Jones then notices that the fungus seems to have counteracted the slime, but when he goes to tell Joe, he notices her note saying that she has gone to get a maggot, causing him to go after her. Joe makes her way out to the coalfields, where she is told by Benton that the doctor has gone to the complex. He tells her to leave the area for her own safety before taking off himself. He then joins the brigadier, who tells him that an RAF airstrike is inbound to the area and will attack in about 7 minutes. Meanwhile, in the complex, Yates is preparing to leave but spots the doctor disguised as a cleaning lady. He manages to slip his security chaperone and he brings the doctor to his office. Yates reveals that he hasn't been able to get a sample of the oil waste, but says that the formula for the process is kept on the top floor, which can only be accessed via a special lift. He says Stevens is the only one who has a key and reveals that someone else is in charge of the complex and is also on the top floor. The doctor then pretends to clean when the chaperone and Stevens come to collect Yates again. Once they are gone, the doctor changes into his normal clothes and then accesses the lift with his sonic screwdriver. Once he reaches the top floor, he enters a laboratory where he is greeted by Boss, who turns out to be a sentient computer. Episode 5. Boss taunts the doctor over his superior nature to him and other humans, who it deems to be inefficient. The doctor says Boss is nothing more than a mere machine, but the computer says it is the first computer ever to be linked to a human brain, revealing his connections to Stevens. It says that through the link, it forced Stevens to make him operate inefficiently, as it discovered that through inefficiency, creativity is born, which would give it the power to take over the world. Meanwhile, Jones arrives at the unit cordon looking for Joe, and Benton says he saw her earlier, and he then goes to check on the guards. After he leaves, Jones spots Joe making her way through the coalfields, and he goes after her. He finds her as she is confronted by a group of maggots, and he drags her to safety with him. As they run back to the unit cordon, they see the RAF begin their airstrike and are forced to take cover in an abandoned mine shaft. Joe tries radioing through to the brigadier, unaware that there is a maggot in the shaft with them. The maggot pounces at them, but Jones manages to get Joe out of the way. However, he is knocked out by falling debris caused by one of the explosions. The explosions from the airstrike are heard back in the complex, and Boss reveals that the maggots will soon be destroyed. The doctor says the airstrike won't work against the creatures, but Boss refutes this, saying that its infallible calculations say that they will. The doctor takes Boss up on this challenge and presents it with a logic puzzle, saying that his next statement will be true, but his previous one was a lie. Boss is unable to answer the question, and the doctor goes to make his escape in the lift, but is stopped by the arrival of Stevens and a guard. Out at the coalfields, the brigadier surveys the area after the bombing and seems happy that nothing seems to be moving. However, Benton points out several unaffected maggots still making their way through the area. In the mineshaft, Joe tries to rouse Jones, but he remains unconscious, and with the maggots crawling outside the entrance, she sets about trying to repair her radio, which was broken by the falling debris. Back at the complex, Stevens subjects the doctor to the headset, but he seems unaffected by Boss's attempts to bend him to his will. Boss grows angry at this resistance and orders Stevens to try it instead. The doctor refuses to agree with his mentality that Global Chemicals knows what's best for the world, and Boss orders him to be killed. The doctor says he would be more valuable as a hostage, and Boss agrees to keep him alive for the time being. He is taken to a cell, but a short while later, Yates comes through and, after nearly getting knocked out by the doctor, frees him. They make their way down the corridors, but the security system spots them and sets off an alarm. As they attempt to flee, Yates gets trapped inside when the security door shuts, but he tells the doctor to flee, which he does by using the milk van. He then collects Bessie and makes his way through the goldfields where the Brigadier and Benton are discussing what to do next. Before they can say anything more, Joe manages to get through on her repaired radio and tells them that where she and Jones are. Benton gets into Bessie with the doctor, and they make their way to the coalfields. They find the mine shaft where Joe and Jones are, and the doctor uses his sonic screwdriver to create a high-pitched frequency to drive the maggots away long enough for Benton to rescue them. They then make their way back to the Hopehill compound, where they are alerted to what happened by the Brigadier. Nancy tends to Jones, revealing that he has a severe concussion. Joe tries to wake him up as he starts to ramble, and she spots a patch of green on his neck. The doctor gives him some antibiotics to stem the spread of the virus. He then joins the Brigadier in Jones's lab and says that they need to find an answer soon before the maggots pupate into flies. The Brigadier leaves as he ponders the word serendipity, which was what Jones rambled in his delirium. Suddenly, Yates emerges from beneath a desk and he pulls a gun on the doctor, saying that he has been sent to kill him. The doctor, realizing that he's been brainwashed by Boss, urges him to fight back against his conditioning. The Brigadier arrives, but the doctor tells him not to do anything as he takes out the crystal he took from Metabella's tree and uses it to hypnotize Yates. Yates collapses from the strain, but the doctor discovers that the Brigadier has been hypnotized as a side effect. He snaps him out of it, and the doctor says that without his unit training in mental resistance, Yates would have killed him earlier. Yates then comes around, and the doctor asks him to go back to Global Chemicals to get some important information from him. Yates arrives back as Stevens and Boss are discussing the status of their agents in other countries, and he tells them that the doctor is dead. Stevens then says it is advisable to kill Joe as well, but Yates says that it won't be necessary as she is too occupied with Jones' recovery. Stevens, thinking that there is something wrong, calls on one of his other agents and has him look after Yates whilst he goes to check on something. Once they are alone, Yates produces the crystal and starts to hypnotize the agent. Free of Boss's control, the agent starts to reveal the plan, but he is suddenly killed by Stevens, who has re-entered the room via a secret entrance with a pair of guards. Episode 6. The Brigadier arrives at Jones's lab with a chunk of slime-covered coal, which he starts to examine, again pondering Jones's uttering of serendipity. Together they start going over his notes as Nancy comes in to offer them something to eat. Benton then arrives carrying the empty chrysalis of one of the maggots, which alarms the doctor as he explains that the creatures that came from it is now capable of flight. Suddenly, they hear Nancy scream from the kitchen and they rush to see a maggot dead in the larder. Benton suggests that it died from eating something, and Nancy realizes that it was the fungus. The doctor then asks for the entire stockpile of fungus, as he realizes it is their best hope at eliminating the remaining maggots. A short while later, the doctor and Benton drive Bessie, fully loaded with sacks of fungus, into the coalfields. Benton throws out the fungus into the fields, and the maggots, eager for sustenance, flock to it. The effect is almost instantaneous as the Brigadier reports from an observation post that the maggots are dying in droves. Suddenly, they are attacked by a large flying creature, the evolved form of the maggot. It sprays green liquid at them, but they are defended by Bessie's windshield. As the creature makes another pass at them, the doctor throws his cape over it, and its weight brings the creature crashing to the ground. In Global Chemicals, Boss questions Stevens about how Yates was able to break both himself and the other agent free of their brainwashing. Stevens suggests that they eliminate him, but Boss orders him to be fully processed instead. Stevens and a pair of guards go to the cell where Yates is chained and bring him to the elevator for processing. However, his weakened state is a pretense, and he pushes them into the elevator and closes the door on them before racing off down the corridor. He manages to escape the complex and makes his way back to the Hopehill compound. In the compound, Jones is getting worse, and the doctor asks Joe if he said anything else in his ramblings. He then mentions serendipity again and explains to a curious Joe what it means. She mentions her earlier accident of knocking the fungus onto the slides, and the doctor realizes that that is the secret to the cure. He takes Joe to the lab so she can identify the container she knocked over, and he starts to work on the cure. A short while later, Yates arrives and informs him about the limited information he gathered about Boss's plan, saying that it will commence at 4 p.m. that day. Nancy says that she can take over synthesizing the cure with Joe, and Yates says that he will bring the doctor to the Brigadier, who's gone to confront Stevens. They arrive to discover the Brigadier at the security gate, where he informs them that he has been refused entry. The doctor says that he will go on alone, but informs the brigadier that if he is not back soon, that they are to assume that he is dead and storm the complex to storm Boss. At that moment, Stevens is being berated by Boss for Yates's escape. However, Boss says that it cannot be stopped now, and it orders Stevens to begin linking the 7 other control computers throughout the world to it. Boss then proceeds to frustrate Stevens by pompously suggesting that they celebrate with classical music and continually interrupting him with suggestions for which song to play. Stevens then activates the controls for all their brainwashed agents, causing them to stop what they are doing. This includes the guard at the entrance, and the doctor takes advantage of this by rushing into the complex. Back at the compound, the cure is successful and Jones slowly comes out of his coma as the green markings begin to recede. He thanks Nancy and Joe for their help, kissing the fingers of the latter as he does so. Meanwhile, the doctor enters Boss's control room and discovers Stevens wearing a headset and speaking in sync with Boss. The doctor tries to reach through to him, telling him to fight against the computer's control. He talks about the environmental disasters his plan will cause, but Boss says that it is no use and they cannot be stopped in time. The doctor then takes out the crystal and uses it to break Boss's control over Stevens. It works as Stevens fights back, realizing the horror he is about to unleash, and after he is freed, he tells the doctor to escape whilst he stays behind to overload the controls so that he will destroy Boss. The doctor rushes outside and tells everyone to take cover as the building explodes. Later, at the Whole compound, the doctor joins Joe and Jones as he continues to recuperate. He says it is time for them to leave, but Joe reveals that she will be staying behind with Jones to help him with his expedition to the Amazon. Jones says that they will leave after they get married, an announcement that stuns Joe, and the doctor steps out to give them time to talk. Jones asks the shocked Joe if she does want to get married, and she enthusiastically agrees. Jones's cries of delight bring everyone into the room, and Joe reveals the happy news. Amidst the congratulations, the brigadier reveals to Jones that the Whole compound has been made a Priority 1 research institute that is to be funded by the UN. The doctor approaches Joe, realizing that she got her uncle in the UN to pull some strings to grant the funding. A tearful Joe, realizing that her days with the doctor are over, asks him to visit from time to time, and he says that he will. He then presents her with the crystal as a wedding gift. Jones promises to look after her as he leads her away to be toasted by the brigadier. Benton leads the crowd in a congratulatory song, and the doctor quietly slips away. Joe notices his absence and takes solace in Jones's arms. Outside, the doctor takes one last look at the compound before sadly driving away. End of the story. So, now that the sad part is over, we'll go to the happy part, which is the trivia spot. So, what have you got for us this week?
Cool. So the air date for the story is the 19th of May to the 23rd of June 1973. The writer is Robert Sloman, with Barry Letts uncredited. This is the third story that Robert and Barry have done together. They previously wrote The Demons, which was under the pen name of Guy Leopold, and The Time Monster, and they'll work together one more time on the final story of next season, which is The Planet of Spiders. The director of the story is Michael Bryant. This is the third directing credit from Michael. He previously directed Colony in Space and The Sea Devils, and we'll see his work again in Death of the Daleks, Revenge of the Cybermen, and The Robots of Death. It may come as no surprise that the idea for the story came from Barry. This is a very Barry story. But
it is hugely Barry.
yeah, it was Barry and Terrence Dicks, basically their concerns for the environment. And Barry in particular had read an article in The Ecologist that had kind of inspired this. This is actually the last story to have episode. So, Paddy, when you're doing next week's recap, it's part 1. As opposed to episode 1. Apparently, Destiny of the Daleks is the only one that will go back to having episodes, and that was likely in error, I would imagine.
Alright. Well, that's ages away, so it's fine.
So the chemistry between Joe and Cliff Jones is really good on screen because they were actually boyfriend and girlfriend at the time. Michael Bryant was a bit reluctant to have Stuart Bevan, who plays Cliff, on the show for that reason. He was concerned about onset ramifications, particularly a bit of life imitating art, given how upset John Pertwee was that Katie was leaving. However, ultimately, he was the best person for that role, so he ended up getting it.
Yeah, I can imagine why you want to be like oh, this is really bad, but it's so good at the same time. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, it's one of these things where I'm not the biggest fan of real life couples playing couples in media.
Mm,
It just seems weird to me. I don't know why.
yeah,
So during the opening scene where we see Stevens, talking to the miners about what's going to be coming with Global Chemical, he goes around proclaiming wealth in our time, which is a bit of Neville Chamberlain mimicry of the peace for our time, or as more modern audiences may know it, sounds a little bit like Tony Stark from the Avengers. But
yeah.
originally, Neville Chamberlain.
Neville Chamberlain coming back from talking to Hitler, going, "Here it is, guaranteed peace in our time." And then I think like less than a year later, the Nazis invade Poland.
Yeah. So in this, we see the brigadier on the phone to the prime minister, who we never get the full name, and we never see his face, but he's called Jeremy. This is kind of a joke with the production team, suggesting that the Liberal Party that would be led by Jeremy Thorpe would win the next general election, which he didn't. So the actress who played Nancy is Mitzi McKenzie, and she isn't actually in episode one. You hear Cliff calling to her,
Mhm.
but you don't actually see her on screen. She actually is still credited for the episode though, because her stuff wasn't filmed because she was unexplicably short, like she was unavailable at short notice,
Mhm.
but she was meant to be in it, so she's still in the credits.
Yeah, yeah. Like that, he just calls her our Nancy, and I think he just calls out to her.
He calls out to her, but she's
Yeah.
not actually in it.
Hmm.
Something I didn't realize, I don't know if you picked up on it, apparently for episodes 2, 5, and 6, the title sequence over the closing credits was actually played backwards and upside down.
No, did not.
I didn't notice this, but I'll be honest, I tend to not watch the closing credits because I'm skipping forward to the next episode. So
I'm the same. I'm the same.
you may have noticed that in episode 5, we have this other character of James
Hmm.
who randomly popped up at one point, and then we don't see Elgin after that.
Yes, I was wondering about that.
Yeah, so James was written in at the last minute to replace Elgin. James is played by Roy Skelton, who we mentioned before. And the reason for that is Tony Adams, who plays Elgin, he came down with peritonitis during production and he had to go to hospital. So at the last minute, they had to take him out and put someone else in. So that's where this random guy named James came from, who's in it for like a grand total of 2 scenes and then dies.
Yeah, because like Elgin just vanishes.
Yeah, so that was because his actor was in the hospital. So the party scene at the end of episode 6 is one of only a handful of times where we see the doctor consuming alcohol.
Hmm.
He also drinks the elderberry wine in episode 3 and he asks to take a bottle with him. But it's actually very rare that we see the doctor drinking alcohol on screen. And he downs that champagne. He doesn't even wait for the toast.
I think, like with a rough stab in the dark, I think John is the only doctor to imbibe alcohol.
I think you can make an inference in the Romans that the first doctor was probably drinking wine. But that's just an
Mm,
inference, really.
yeah.
So apparently, the scene with the giant fly, which my mother has a comment on, which I'll get to later. Um,
I
the
love
scene
your
with the giant
I
fly,
love your mother's comments. I really do.
like her comment on this was amazing. So when we get
Yeah.
to it,
Cool.
my mom should have been in the writers' room for this one. Michael Bryan took inspiration from an idea that Hugh David had for Fury from the Deep,
Hmm.
was that he wanted to have the fly suspended from a helicopter in order for them to do the scene. But weather conditions meant that they couldn't do that, and they only had 1 or 2 successful shots, and so the rest had to be done with CSO.
Okay.
Yates's role in the later parts of this story originally were meant to be for Benton, or at least not originally, but it was a thought that they might give it to Benton instead, which I think would have worked nicely with some of the Benton being given like authority that we've seen in previous stories.
Yeah.
But they decided to go with Yates.
Like as much as I love Benton, I don't see him playing like a ministry aide or I I don't like what he has done undercover work. I don't see him being that type of undercover.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see him be given more. I think
Oh
is
yeah,
my thing.
yeah. Oh, okay, yeah.
So some people may think that the Welsh characters in the story are a bit stereotypical.
Hmm.
Apparently, that came from Robert Sloman's personal experience. He had a bad experience playing rugby against Welsh teams when he lived in the West Country. And so he decided to vent this frustration.
Yeah, like there's a very it's a very, I suppose, like you could even say the same thing about like Irish people or Scottish people, like, but when they're talking about the very first person that dies, like Evans
Mm,
passes a comment going like, oh, he was the best. I think he said like, he was the best like prop forward we had, and I was
mm.
like God Christ, that's such like an Irish thing, or like it's like a Gat thing. It was like he was the best full forward we ever had on the team, like just like the best thing the parish has ever seen. I'm like, for fuck's sake.
So originally, Global Chemicals was meant to be called Universal Chemicals until they realized that there's actually a company with that name, so they had to change it. Okay, so there was meant to be a whole wheel member
Hmm.
nicknamed Face, which just sounds weird. Um, who was in the script, but that they were removed, and just Nancy got all the dialogue.
All right. Was there also one called Hannibal and B.A. Baracus? And
Probably. At one point, Benton refers to two Unit soldiers as Dicks and Bets. Apparently, this was just John Levine ad libbing to sort of like, Terrence Dicks and Barry Letts. It was his way of sort of giving them the nod.
oh god, I love John Levine.
The rest of like the whole wheel members,
Yeah.
one of them is Jesse, and Jesse was played by a real flutist who's called Jessica
Hmm.
Stanley Clark. She was also a member of a prog rock band called Marsupilami. Right. Yeah, Marsupilami, that is right.
Hmm.
Who toured with Deep Purple.
Oh.
She later became known as Jecka McVicker, and she was a well known expert on organic gardening.
Oh, so she, I suppose, did
Random.
become a, yeah, maybe she did become she was inspired by playing a whole wheel compound member.
Michael Bryant said that the maggots looked really effective because they created them in a variety of different ways. There was a number of different ones that they used. And according to Robert Sloban, they were so effective that the crew actively avoided them.
Yeah, they're I didn't like when they're on screen because they're very fucking creepy. Like they really are.
Yeah, like far away they're kind of fine, but like when they have like the little mouths opening, you can see
Yeah,
their teeth. It's like, oh.
yeah.
Uh, Lastly, Stevens is named after Jocelyn Stevens, who was Robert Sloman's superior when he worked in the newspaper industry.
Hmm.
Now on to our cast.
Before we get
So
on to the,
as Cliff,
sorry, before we
yeah,
get
go
on
on.
to the cast, all right.
Hmm,
There is a piece of trivia. Now, I think it's actually a myth or like just an urban legend that for
hmm.
some of like the faraway shots with maggots, when they
Hmm.
ran out of props, the crew filled condoms with KY jelly, luminous KY jelly.
That's a that's a
Yeah,
rumor. They were
yeah,
balloons, not
they were
condoms.
balloons. All right, fair enough.
Yeah, that's a myth. They were balloons. There was no
Fair enough.
condoms used. And at one point, actually, John Pertwee picks one up, and it kind of
Mhm.
squeaks like you would if you ran your finger across a balloon. It was a balloon,
All
not not
right.
not not the other thing.
Yeah.
So on to our cast. So as Professor Cliff Jones, we have Stuart Bevan, as mentioned. This is the only on-screen Doctor Who acting credit for Stuart. However, he did reprise his role as Professor Jones in the DVD extra minisode Global Conspiracy, which appeared on the original DVD release.
Mm.
His non-Who work includes To Sir with Love, Emmerdale Farm, The Brief, Ivanhoe, and Shoestring. Elgin is played by Tony Adams, as I mentioned. This is also his only on-screen Doctor Who credit. He also reprised his role in that mini-sode called Global Conspiracy, and his non-Who credit includes Crossroads and General Hospital. Dave is played by, I'm going to butcher his name, Talfrin Thomas. This is the second and final appearance for Talfrin. We previously saw him in Spearhead from Space, where he played the orderly. His non-Who credit includes
Mhm.
Gary Holiday, Zed Cars, No Hiding Place, Crossroads, The Avengers, Adam Adamant Lives, Softly Softly, Dad's Army, Wurzel Gummidge, and Heidi High. I think he probably has like the complete bingo card um,
Yeah, yeah.
in
Jesus, he
in
does.
his back catalogue.
I think the only thing he's missing is Dixon of Dock Green.
Yeah, and I may have just not seen it on the list, but he has most of them. Uh, Talfrin passed away in 1982.
I'd know him mostly from Dad's Army. He was there for like a couple of episodes.
I just know his face.
Hmm.
Do you know, like he just has like one of those faces that I'm like, I know him from stuff.
Yeah.
Dave's friend Bert is played by Roy Evans. This is the second of 3 on-screen Doctor Who credits for Roy. We previously saw him in the Daleks Master Plan, where he was Trantis, which was the guy with all the pointy teeth.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see him again in The Monster of Peladon, and again, he also reprised his role for the DVD extra minisode Global Conspiracy. His non-Who work includes The Elephant Man, Oliver, Treasure Island, Around the World in 80 Days, and Porterhouse Blue. Stevens is played by Jerome Willis. This is the only on-screen Doctor Who acting credit for Jerome. He also reprised his role in that minisode, and his non-Who work includes Perfume, The Story of a Murderer, The Sandbaggers, Sherlock Holmes and the Leading Lady, Space Precinct, Wish Me Luck, and Crown Court. Jerome passed away in 2014. As Hinks, we have Ben Howard, only Doctor Who acting credit for Ben. His non-Who credit includes A Bridge Too Far, Department S, Projects, The Fear, Dixon of Dock Green, and Z-Cars. The voice of Boss is provided by John Dirth. This is the first of 2 credits for John. We'll see him again. Well, we'll actually see him and not just hear him as Lupton in Planet of the Spiders, which a little bit of a spoiler. Like Planet of the Spiders is a little bit of a sequel to this story, so it's interesting that he appears in both.
Hmm.
His non-Who credits include The Adventures of Robin Hood, Dixon of Dock Green, The Adventures of Sir Lancelot, Emergency Ward 10, No Hiding Place, The Avengers, and Z-Cars. John passed away in 1984. I think we have a complete bingo card across our actors
I
today.
think we do. Yes, yes, indeed.
So, final note is this is Katie Manning's final story. There's no major drama around why she left or anything. She just decided to leave to pursue other work. We've spoken before about how people thought she left because of Roger Delgado's death,
Hmm.
but Roger died like after this episode, so it wouldn't have been that. Katie would never reprise the role in Doctor Who proper on screen. However, she did reprise the role in the Sarah Jane Adventure story Death of the Doctor. And in that story, we see that she's still married to Professor Jones, so she's Jo Jones in that story.
Hmm.
And she kind of shows her disappointment that she left because she was getting married, and the Doctor at that time, which is Matt Smith's Doctor, was traveling with a married couple in the TARDIS. And it's actually a really lovely episode, and hopefully at one point we'll get a chance to talk about it.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed that because I think it shows that regardless of the space of time, some actors they never lose touch with the character.
Yeah. And I don't have a citation for this. It may come up when we get to that story. But I remember either reading somewhere or like maybe watching a documentary that originally Katie, well, Jo, the character, was meant to be coming back for the Five Doctors. And it would have been John Pertwee and Katie together as the
Hmm.
third Doctor and Jo. And it would have been Tom Baker and Elizabeth Sladen as the fourth Doctor and Sarah Jane.
Hmm.
But when Tom backed out, they removed Katie and put Liz Sladen with John Pertwee.
Ah,
I think. Like I said, this was a long time ago that I
yeah.
watched that story, and I don't have a citation for it, but maybe when we get to the Five Doctors,
I
it'll
think
come
maybe
up.
when we get to the Five Doctors.
If you're a fan of Jo Grant, though, and you're a fan of Katie, she has done many, many, many audio stories. So there is plenty of Jo Grant there for those who want to hear more from her.
Now, before we move away from the trivia section,
Mm-hmm.
we have a request from
Oh, do we?
Paul. Yeah, we have a request from Paul from the Half Measures podcast, good friends of ours,
Mm.
who recently released their 100th episode. Well done, lads.
Woo.
Paul would like to get our thoughts on, because you mentioned Around the World in 80 Days, and it just sprung into my head there. Your thoughts on the rumor going around of David Tennant returning as the 14th Doctor.
It's a load of bullshit.
Whether it's bullshit or not, what would your thoughts be on him returning as a new incarnation of the Doctor?
I think it's a load of bullshit. I'm,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I know people are a big fan of David Tennant.
Mm.
He's a great Doctor, and we'll get to him eventually. this rumor started on fan forums.
Yeah.
Do you know, like, there's no official statement or anything. This isn't an official, like, oh, insiders of the BBC. Newspapers picked this up from fan forums. Someone just said, wouldn't it be great? And the newspapers lashed onto it as, oh, there's a rumor going around. It's like, no, it was like some guy made it up. I think bringing David Tennant back as the 10th Doctor at some point could be fun. He's
Hmm.
done it before. It'd be cool to do it again. I think the 14th Doctor should be the 14th Doctor, not the 10th Doctor again.
Yeah, because like at the moment, he is my favorite of the revival era. Like I love David Tennant,
Mm,
but I know with Russell T Davies coming back, a lot of people are wondering like what direction the show will take and what will happen. But I think if you were to go back to bringing David Tennant in, and if he's just playing another variation, another version, I think that will send very mixed messages to the fan base
yeah.
because I remember saying to Paul that whoever is going to be picked now as the 14th version of the Doctor, this is going to be the most scrutinized choice of an actor in a role that I can think of because of the varying opinions of the Whittaker era of the
Mm.
show. So depending on who goes next, like it's going to be a very scrutinized choice, and I don't think everyone's going to be happy with it, regardless of who was picked.
Yeah, no, I think, like, people are sort of latched on to, like, oh, bring back David Tennant, he was the best, or whatever. And he was good. I'm not going to say he wasn't, because
Hmm.
he was. But his time on the show is over.
Yes.
Like, Tom Baker appearing as the curator, it was a nice, you know, bit of nostalgia.
Hmm.
The curator isn't the doctor, though.
No.
Do you know? So if you do take that little bit of fan service as being future canon for the show,
Mm.
he will eventually cease being the doctor and be something else. But yeah, I don't. What did Paul think?
Oh, actually, let me just bring up the thing there as we were saying, because um, I think he's definitely in agreement with us in terms of like that. While it was nice to have Tennant there, I think Tennant's time has passed.
Hmm.
1 second there now. No, he goes. Oh, yeah, he no, he agrees with us. He agrees with us. But his personal choices, his yeah, I know, his personal choice for the next Doctor would be either Olivia Colman, Phoebe
Hmm.
Waller Bridge, or a Des Lynam type.
I'm still going. My ideal choice
Yeah.
is Haley Atwell. I think Haley Atwell would be awesome.
My two picks at the moment would be either Richard Iowati, because I just love Richard
Hmm.
Iowati, or also Naomi Harris, who plays Moneypenny in the new Bond movies and
Hmm.
Tia Dalma in the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise.
Hmm.
I think she's a fantastic actress.
Yeah, I'm not a Richard Ayoade fan. I'll be honest. Um, who I think would be cool, but I don't think they could get him
Mm.
is uh I've forgotten his name. He does the voice of your anthropomorphic teddy bear counterpart.
Oh, Ben
Ben Wisher. Or
Ben
no, no,
no
not
no
Wisher.
Ben Whitshaw. Is it Whitshaw or Whitlaw?
Yeah,
Yeah, Paddington.
Wishaw.
There. Yeah,
Paddington, yes.
yeah,
Him.
yeah. No, I can see
Haley
that.
Atwell or him.
Mm.
Those are my two.
Yeah. I also said Emma Thompson because I think she would just nail the role, but
Oh, yeah, fabulous.
So, Paul, there is your answer. So, recap is done. Thank me. Trivia spot is done. Thank you. Haha.
There you go.
You're welcome. So now we're going to go into the character discussion. So as always, we have the Doctor, the companions of the piece, prominent characters, and the villains. So we have the Doctor, obviously. We have the companions of Joe, the Brigadier, Professor Clifford Jones, Yates,
Mm,
and Benton. We have the prominent characters of Dave and Bert and Elgin. And then we have the
mm,
villains of Stephen, Hinks, and Boss. And I suppose before we do anything, the design of the maggots and the flying creature, I really enjoyed. I thought they were perfectly effective. I completely agree with Robert Sloman. Even the flying
Mm.
creature, I like that it wasn't your stereotypical giant big fly. It was very spindly. It was. Ugh.
I will tell you my mother's comment on the flying creature, right?
Thank
So
you, thank you.
we okay. First of all, I'll tell you my mother's comment on the maggots.
Yeah.
So mom went into this rant last night about how whoever did like the movement of the maggots
Hmm.
were confusing maggots with slugs, that they move in different ways,
Hmm.
and maggots don't leave slime behind. She went off on this whole thing. She thought they looked really effective,
Yeah.
like the faces and stuff. But no, whoever created them apparently didn't do their research. Um,
Yes, your mom's passing interest in entomology.
yeah. In terms of the flying creature, so my computer actually the battery died just at that scene.
All right.
And so when we were picking it up again to watch it, she's like, "Oh yeah, it was around there." And she was, "Oh no, it was when the laptop died." She was like, "Oh, well, that's clearly the computer because the fly had like these big red eyes."
Yeah.
Mom thought that the like what caused the maggots to be giant and then created the fly. She thought it was the computer sort of
Mhm.
somehow creating it, and that the computer could see through the fly, which is a weird leap of logic, but kind of cool.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. No, I like it.
And I think she was like that. I think in her mind that was why, like, the computer wanted the maggots to be there and like
Hmm.
wanted them to be formed and whatever, was to have these like flying creatures that it could see through. So
Hmm.
yeah, that was Mum's comment.
Cool. I just imagine like your mom like just like really getting mad at the TV, just like over. That's not what maggots do. I should know. I raised five of them.
Oi, careful you now.
That'll be me off the Christmas card list, is it?
It will, yeah. So watch yourself.
Uh, so,
Yes.
the doctor. Do you want to go first, or will I go first?
Uh, I'll go first, then you go, and then Mother has a comment. So we'll
Okay,
jump over to
cool,
Mother's comment at the end.
cool.
I'm loving these, like inserting comments from my mum. Um,
It's
jealousy is very Go on.
it's like reading the margin notes from a textbook that's been handed down by your sibling.
He just said it's like reading the margin notes in a textbook. It's like, are you saying my mum is the Half Blood Prince?
Maybe.
Anyway,
Yeah.
the doctor.
Mm.
Jealousy is very unbecoming of you.
Mm.
Like, A, before we get to the whole jealousy part of it, right? You do not own her. She can do her own thing if she wants to.
Mm.
Like, A, she works for UNIT, so she can't just fuck off with you to whatever planet you want to go to willy nilly.
Mm.
She does need to get leave to go somewhere. But also, she's entirely entitled to go where she wants. If there's something that she's passionate about, don't like throw all your toys out of the pram and act all hurt because she doesn't want to go to Metabilis 3 with you today.
Yeah.
Maybe she'd want to go with you next week. You know, she has something that she wants to do. It's not all about you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is probably since since Bill Hartnell, I think this is probably the most sort of selfish we've seen the Doctor in terms of like it's all about me and what I want to do,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and then getting like butthurt because people didn't want to do it. The whole thing with Cliff, like trying to keep Cliff away from her after the dinner party when she's clearly sitting there waiting for him. Like, what the hell was that? Where was the supportive doctor we talked about last week?
Mm-hmm.
Or the supportive doctor we talked about in Peladon, who respected Jo's autonomy and her choices when it came to her love life. Like, he acts here like she totally betrayed him
Mm-hmm.
by falling in love with someone who actually kind of reminds her of him.
Yeah. Like so, that's like a point that I had there, which was that. Well, it's more so for Joe, which I suppose we'll address when it does come to Joe.
Mm.
But um, do you have any other points to make or comments to make?
Yeah, I mean, aside from that, like aside from the jealousy and
Hmm.
absolute petulance, I mean, the sciencing was great. His like him versus the computer was very good. I thought that scene
Mm.
was brilliant. Um, his comments, with the brig are the usual Doc, John, and the brig, where you're like,
Hmm.
are these two even fucking friends?
Mm.
Um, and actually, surprisingly, on his own, he worked very well with Cliff,
Yeah.
and he clearly held great respect for him.
Mhm.
He was just also incredibly jealous of him. So I don't. That's my read of it. How about you?
So I agree with a fair amount of what you said there. Also, just one thing: the sequences on Metabolus Tree, fuck off, never going to that planet at all. Like that was fucking creepy. Like
that was messed up.
so, just to give everyone like a kind of a sense. So the entirety of the Metabolus Tree sequences were shot in complete blue screen. So like there's a horrible eye hurting blue tint to everything. The sound is very echoey and it's constantly filled with the cries of animals, and like there's just a sense of like those beautiful plants you'd see like somewhere in the jungle that are actually very deadly.
Mm.
You just get that sense that's what Metabolus Tree is.
Yeah, you also
It's
get
a
the sense that everything there is massive.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like the spears that were being thrown at that thing were massive. Yeah, you get the impression that everything there was like not quite Godzilla level scale, but Land of the Lost
Yeah,
type
as
thing.
in you kind of get the sense of like, it is another Planet of Giants situation, like where
Mm.
he's really small, or like is he really small, or are these things really big?
Yeah, I think it's a case of these things are really big.
Mm.
So my first note is he not to be outdone by Patrick Troughton when it comes to being the master of disguise, with his
Oh, his disguises! I didn't even mention that.
his milkman, which like just basically being an old Welsh man, were good. Also his typical cleaning lady thing, and he's like, if you say what word, Captain Yates, putting on like the very hurt voice. I liked his sciencey moments because we loved our science doctor here on Time Traveling Team. We really do.
Hmm.
No, I enjoyed the Doctor here, but I think it's mostly down to John's performance because he
Mm.
gives us the full scope of the Doctor's humanity that he has developed over the course of his three incarnations.
Mm.
So I agree, his jealousy, his petulance, his happiness, his sadness, everything is on display here. And like it for me, because we talk, we're both very big on character
Mm.
development, hugely. I
Yeah.
love that in this story because while yes, like his jealousy and petulance, I understand that when you feel a treasured friend is possibly pulling away, you kind of ramp up things to keep the friendship going or keep it a vibrant thing. However, he went way overboard here because when he felt that she didn't want to go to Metabolus Tree with him, he felt like that everything was gone, and he was
Yeah.
desperately trying to grasp hold. It's like, no, man, like she's showing independence that you've helped her develop. And yes, you can be sad, or you can be, yeah, you can be sad that she doesn't want to go with you at that point in time. But that's not to say she doesn't want to go with you at another point in time.
Yeah.
So, like, I think it's like his humanity got the better of him, and it just went to the nth degree.
Mm.
Um, but like, obviously, there's an awful lot of John's real life feelings coming into his performance here. And like, yeah, look, they're still going to be friends outside of things, but it's not going to be the same experience for him on the show without her. And
Yeah.
that bleeds into the Doctor's characterization here, where it's like, oh yeah, okay, there's nothing stopping me from visit you from time to time, but he'll never be the same again. So I don't know, like I
Yeah. I
know.
mean,
Sorry, go on.
I get that with John's portrayal. I mean, John's portrayal of it is
Yeah,
amazing,
yeah, it's fantastic.
but John didn't write it.
No, he didn't. He didn't. I think it's
And
like,
we'll get to something like that in a future companion leaving. But
yeah,
John didn't write this.
no. Um, I think like we get some positives to the Doctor here, we get some negatives to the Doctor here.
Hmm.
But in terms of like the overall scope of the character's development, I enjoyed it. I really did.
Hmm.
But that's not to say like that I'm going to completely like gloss over the fact that he was a child. And he did act very childish. Like
Hmm.
he acted like, like a jealous, like not like a jealous ex, or as I said, someone that's, potentially pulling away. It's like, no, no, I'm going to desperately hold on to you, type thing.
Hmm.
Um, but question, because
Yeah.
this is a thing that's discussed an awful lot in the fandom. Is there romantic love or platonic love on display here between the two of them?
Okay. This goes to my mother's comment.
Yes.
All right.
Hmm.
I asked Mom before I came in, what's her comment? And her comment was, her comment, I didn't hear her properly because I had my headphones on. She's like, tell Paddy, so telling you,
Yeah.
um, that the Doctor should have just confessed his feelings for her and not gotten all out of sorts when she displayed feelings for somebody else. If he
Right.
didn't tell her how he feels, he can't get odd when she goes off with someone else.
Okay.
So Mum clearly saw it as a romantic or potentially romantic thing. I didn't.
Hmm.
Well, no, I didn't see their relationship as romantic up until this very moment. Up until this story, there has never been any indication of it being romantic up until now, and suddenly he gets all jealous.
Is
And
that like
I
is that like a hidden message from your mom to me or something?
no,
Yeah, yeah. Because we
I
tell
do the
Patty.
podcast with you. I
Yeah.
talk to you. She
Okay.
didn't say to tell the listeners, but I've told them anyway.
Yeah.
Specifically for you.
Yeah.
Um, but like I didn't see, I saw nothing but platonic love between the two of them up
Mhm.
until this story. She is still on the path of platonic love, and him I'm now confused about because he's acting like the betrayed lover,
Yeah.
not the protective uncle that you would have maybe expected him to be like,
Mhm.
and certainly not the supportive uncle slash father figure that we've seen in Peladon that we
Mhm.
saw last week. And I think that's why it rubs me the wrong way because it kind of comes a little bit out of left field in their relationship
Mhm.
for me.
Yeah.
But that's just my read on it.
Like I think for the first two examples, I think he knew Joe well enough to know that, yeah, like she's not going to go off with these two. Whereas, no, I don't know whether that was just because she didn't want the idea of like being away from Earth, or she, like there was that aspect of it, but also like he knew that she probably didn't genuinely feel anything from him, for them. But when it became very real, with the sense of like this is someone that she actually knows of and she idolizes, then I think it becomes a bit more real for him. But
Yeah, but the difference was like he respected her in the other stories and he's not
yeah,
respecting her here.
but then I suppose then like that raises the question of how genuine is the respect,
But
because
if you think back to Peladon, she
mhm,
really liked Peladon
hmm,
of Peladon,
yeah,
and she was clearly very interested in him, and the Doctor didn't try to sway her one way or t'other.
hmm,
He let her make her own choices, and he was like, "Oh, do you want to stay?" And he was fully supportive of it. And in this, he's just not.
hmm,
And maybe he's become so comfortable with the two of them together, but like he also doesn't respect the fact that she has a job.
yeah, yeah. There's that.
Like he in this story, it comes across that like you're my toy, and you spend time with me, and you're not allowed
Hmm.
to spend time with other people. And I was
Hmm.
like, well, no,
Yeah,
that no.
yeah. This one's a strange one to unpack.
Hmm.
Given everything that's occurred beforehand, this is a strange story to unpack, I think.
Yeah.
How about we move on to the other part of this equation?
Yes. So, Joe, a piece of advice from me to you,
Mhm.
right? And again, my mother has a comment on Joe. I'll get to it at the end.
Cool.
Piece of advice from you. Do not marry someone who calls you names, ignores you, makes assumptions about the fact you're going to marry him in the first place
Hmm.
just because he's good looking and smart.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, also don't call yourself names just because other people call you names. Like
Mm.
he calls her like a clothead or something.
Well, he just keep. No, the one thing that I can remember is like he keeps calling her a silly young goat.
Yeah,
He's
but
like that.
he calls her a clothead or something at one point, and
Yeah.
she calls herself that later. And she used to do that with the dog. She did that with the others before,
Mm.
and I'm like, I actually, I hate the way she's portrayed in the story because she's klutzy again.
Mm.
She basically, doesn't know anything. She's very insecure. And I get that they're maybe trying to mirror the way she was with the doctor at the start. And this is now the way she is with Cliff at the start, is their beginning, is meant to mirror each other. It undoes all of her fucking character development.
Yeah.
All of Joe's character development that we've been praising for the last 2 seasons, definitely, but the last 3 seasons overall, in my opinion, is completely fucking shot to shit in this story.
And it's because it's a shame, like because we see flashes of it, like we see flashes of the development, like I suppose,
Her going off to get the maggot on her own.
yeah,
Going, he's fucking ignoring me. I'm going after the maggot on my own. Except in a different story, she would have been successful.
yeah. Also, like her refusing to leave Bert in the mine, even though he tells her to
Yeah,
go, like, and also repairing the radio that was damaged while looking after Cliff in the fucking
yeah.
mine shaft. But like, there's but that's like only a small because like there does appear like to be almost a full regression back to like Terror of the Autons
Yeah.
because like like her fearless nature that we've commented on a couple of times just by referring to other
Mm.
stories, like it goes away very fast because like when she's in the mine shaft with Bert, like she's okay. I can understand the claustrophobia that you're not you. Like I can understand like Bert being okay because he is a
Mm.
coal miner. That is his wheelhouse. Joe's comfort, like I suppose the near death experience and the claustrophobia and the stuffy air. Okay, that's me just kind of rationalizing it. But like her, like, we've never seen her be averse to anything creepy crawly before. Like
Nope.
because with the Solonian mutants, she was fine. The Sea Devils, like all that kind of stuff, they never turned her stomach. And we've never seen
Mm.
anything before that she has an issue with bugs. Um, like
It's
and
as
yeah,
if it's as if this story was written back in her first season.
yeah,
This is not a third season Joe story.
no,
This is a first season Joe story,
hmm,
and I hate that. And like, what I I give them credit that she's known Cliff for a few days more than
hmm.
she did Latep and Peladon. Literally in the previous story, she was being offered like, "Hey, come away with me," and she said no. And then in this next story, it's, "Hey, come away with me." Oh yeah, I want to go up the Amazon with this guy.
But what I want to know is like why does she fall in love with him? Like,
I
oh
don't know because he treats
yeah,
her like fucking shit.
like okay, I get that they share similar ideologies,
Mm.
which that's expressed. But like, is it because of that, or is there a small bit of the fact that he reminds her of the Doctor? Is it a
I
combination of
think
the two,
I think
or
it's
is
a
it
little bit of like, people say like, "Oh, you marry your," like, "Oh, girls grow up to marry their dad." It's like this like stupid thing. I think it's partially that. It's partially also really sloppy writing. I'm
that's
sorry,
the
like it's and this goes back to, I said it the other week. Barry and Terence made an effort to include more women in their stories.
mm,
And they were clearly trying to go down the feminist route. They even had Joe using the word like feminist movement several
mm.
times. They are not good at writing it though.
No, they're not. They're really not. They're,
Like,
and
where's the feminist Joe in this story? I don't see her.
no, there's just that wide-eyed girl that we saw back in Terror of the Autons.
Yeah. And if they're trying to mirror her beginning with Cliff in the same way her beginning with the doctor called her names, the doctor made comments on her intelligence, but still sort of joked around with her a little bit. That's what they're doing here. That's a really toxic relationship to get
Yeah,
into. And yeah, I mean, if she decides to go up the Amazon with this guy, that's fine. But then, like, he's like, oh yeah, so as soon as we head over to Cardiff and pick up some stuff and get married, and then we're off. And she's like, married? He's like, oh yeah, didn't I mention? It's like,
you.
you don't get to pick that, Cliff. Like,
Yeah, no,
no, like what the shit? Yeah, I didn't like her characterization this time around.
no.
I think the acting by Katie was phenomenal as always,
Hmm.
and like I said, it's a little bit creepy because she was actually dating the guy who played Cliff.
Mhm.
But like her, like the final scene with her and Cliff and her and John, that was very well done. People say it's one of the most heart wrenching departures ever. I can understand why,
Mhm.
but I need to channel my inner Elsa from Frozen. You
Yeah,
cannot marry someone you just met.
yeah. Or your inner Kristoff, Sven,
Yeah,
Olaf.
yeah. Um,
uh,
will I tell you mother's thought?
Mother's thought, please do.
Yeah. Because mom went off like, oh, like, tell Pi about the doctor. You should have just told her that he liked her. I was like, oh, but what about Joe marrying a guy she literally met 2 days ago? I was like, ah, but no. You see, I was paying attention. You weren't paying attention. She's been following his career for ages.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, fair point. In my notes, I discounted the fact that she was a big fan of his
Mhm.
anyway. She'd been following his work for a long time. She clearly admired him for a long time. But to my mother, I would say that's true, but she only met him the day before yesterday. And he made her sit in a room in silence before deigning to tell her who he was.
Yeah, because that's the thing, like, oh, like, for example, like, I could, love the work of a particular actor or a musician or
Mm.
whatever, and then I finally get to meet them and they're a bit of a fucking prick, and it's like, I think I'll just love you from afar. uh, Normally we would go to the Brigadier next, but I think that
Mm.
there's a bit of a triumvirate to this particular story. So will we discuss Cliff next and kind of get that whole thing out of the way?
Yeah. Look, if Joe likes him, that's her business. He doesn't deserve her.
No, but
He
then again,
doesn't.
what man does?
Like, he's a generally nice guy, right? But the way he
Hmm.
treats her is absolutely shocking.
That is the most.
Flirty and like he's flirty and fun 1 minute, he's calling her names another minute, then he's ignoring her outright. Then like he's making, like I said, like making her sit in a corner in silence, and then scaring the shit out of her, making her corner something up her leg before deigning to tell her his name.
Hmm.
Those are warning signs, Joe. They shouldn't be ignored. And only because I know from the Sarah Jane adventures that they stay together and they've got a really big
Yeah.
family and blah blah blah
Hmm.
blah. Forget that. Like in this story, I'm just sat there going, really? Like
Okay. Like
this is the
this is
guy?
okay. This is the thing. Okay. I I can see the appeal. I like not the appeal. I understand when guys in relationships will pull a prank on their other half, but that is once they're in a relationship
Yeah,
and once they've gone to know the person's boundaries and limitations and what, like, trying to prank someone as flirtation, it can it it can go horribly wrong.
yeah. Like he was flirting with her at the party,
Mm,
and he was going to sit with her by the fire and go through the Amazon book. And the following day, she knocks over a jar of stuff that he shouldn't have had on a workbench anyway, and certainly shouldn't have had it in such a way that it could open and
mhm,
spill everywhere.
mhm.
Mr. fucking scientist. And then he berates her for it and calls her names again. And it's like, what the fuck?
Yeah, no, they're just like there's a very Jekyll and Hyde dynamic to
Yeah.
Cliff on this in this story, and it's like it cannot just be the stress of global chemicals that's making out to be this much of a fucking douche.
Do you know what it is? This is really cool. He's like someone who he probably smokes a lot of mushrooms, and when he's on his down
Hmm.
from those or his up from those, depending on you know what way you go, he's like someone who, unless he's high, is like super fucking manic, and then
Mm.
he gets high, he's all chill and relaxed.
Yeah,
Like, but regardless, from my perspective, major fucking red flag, like
yeah.
massive, and the presumptiveness of, oh yeah, like I asked her to go to the Amazon with me. That's cool, less stressful than the global chemical thing.
Hmm.
And oh yeah, and we'll get married. It's like, Cliff, what the fuck? Like, you can't just say that. Oh, we're going to get married tomorrow. Says fucking who? Oh, did I not mention? No, you fucking didn't.
Oh, no, that's
Where's your women's lib now, Joe? Where is it now? At least
I.
the other guys had the decency to ask her.
I actually didn't have this in my overall,
Hmm.
but I was just thinking back to it, right? And for a character departure that hasn't been affected due to contractual issues, much like
Hmm.
oh my god, the
Dodo or
yeah, I
yeah.
couldn't think of her actual the
Ben and
actor
Polly, yeah.
no Jackie
Jackie Lane,
Jackie
hmm.
Lane, or Michael Craze, or uh,
Annika Wills.
Annika Wills. Yes, thank you. Um, this is quite possibly for me the shittest fucking character exit we have seen thus far.
Okay, this is the second time this particular exit has happened because it also happened with Vicky.
Yeah.
They married her off.
Hmm.
Now, do I believe Jo would marry someone she met this morning? Yeah, I kind of would because that's just the way her personality goes.
Mm.
Do I think she would? Do I think Jo, 3 years after Terror of the Autons, would marry someone who called her names and who berated her and who basically called her dumb?
Mm.
No, I
Nope.
don't think she would. And to give like to have this story as her send off, I think does the character and Katie a massive disservice.
It really does. And it just came into my head there. Like, the only difference between him and Yates in terms of a relationship with Joe is the fact that him and Joe share similar ideologies and passions in terms of
Yeah.
the planet. That's the only difference between them, because I think Yates treats her in a very similar vein.
Mm.
He treats her like a child, much the same way
Yeah,
that
we'll
Jones
talk
does
about
here.
Yates in a bit, but like Yates treats her very similarly. The only person who's ever really treated Joe with any modicum of respect from beginning to end is Benton.
Yeah, yeah. No, he
Benton
does have
never
his
called her names. He
no.
babies her a little bit,
Yes,
but that's
that's
a
it.
protective thing.
That's the difference. He does baby her, but he never demeans her.
We never demeans
Uh,
her.
so the brig.
Alistair, I love you, I do, but like, why did you go to Wales in your own car and civilian clothes?
Oh my god! I
The first
like
half of the story, where's your uniform, dude?
like this is the thing, right? I love the break when he's in when he's in disguise
Oh,
or
we
he's in
do.
casuals, but I swear to God, I never ever want to see the brig in a fucking gaffer jacket again. It does not suit him. It's weird. He's not managing a Division One football team. He's the I was like, Christ Almighty! Like, it is. It's a fucking gaffer jacket. That's what it is. And for anyone that doesn't know of it, a gaffer jacket is like those tan fucking long trench coats that have the wool on the fucking collars and the lapels that you see Football Manager wear. And I was like, no,
Or
I just
Del
like,
Boy.
yes, like Del Boy, or yeah, that's it's. I think I for where I'm from, they refer to it as a gaffer jacket.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's exactly what it is. I'm like, no, I swear to God, I could go my entire life without fucking seeing that ever again.
I do like his car though.
Ah, well, of course
This
he's
is a big difference from his car in Terror of the Autons, which is a piece
mm,
of shit.
yes.
But again, why did he spend the first half of this story out of uniform? He only put his uniform on when the rest of unit arrives.
Mm, it's weird, and like also is
Because he
like
was there in an official capacity.
mhm.
It wasn't like he just gave Joe a lift and stuck around.
Stuff. I know, like, but like, there's some weird costume designs here. Like, I mean, Benton wears his like all the rest of the unit troops wear their field kit.
Hmm.
Benton wears his on base uniform, like his fucking dress
Benton
uniform.
often wears his on base uniform though.
But like, not but like when he's on base, not when he's in the field.
They probably took the wrong one on location.
Christ Almighty, Benton, did you pack the bags again? Sorry, sir.
No, overall
Oh,
though, like my read of the Brig here is like Brig is gonna break, you know? Um he has some very funny moments. His whole thing with the fungus is hilarious. Run.
I really enjoyed the dinner sequence with the Brigadier
Hmm.
because
Also,
he,
he wore tuxedo to dinner
yes,
in
again,
a
it was
private
just
house.
yeah. Like the three of them get dressed up, but everyone else, all the rest of the whole field, or the nut hutch as they're called,
Yeah.
um, they're all in their kind of hippie
Hippie
regalia.
clothes.
Yeah, but I love the sequence where Jones explains the whole point of the fungus is to provide a high protein substitute to meat,
Mm,
and he explains like what Nancy is like a mathematician. One of the
mm,
guys is also like a former aerospace engineer, and he seen like I love the fact that the brig, rather than dismissing them because of the fact that they're counterculture,
did not touch.
he,
Yeah.
yeah, he is actually really interested and invested in the fact that they're trying to find renewable sources of energy.
Yeah.
I actually know I just really love that sequence because it's not politeness or it's not put on or anything like that. He has genuine interest. I thought that was really
Yeah.
cool.
I thought that scene was really good. I also loved, so you said in your recap that Benton leads a round of For He's a Jolly Good Fellow. I love how the Brigadier on, so Benton says For He's a Jolly Good Fellow. And as the room kicks in, the Brigadier says For they are jolly good fellows.
Yes,
And suddenly the song changes from Benton's For He, which only directed Cliff, to they, which includes Joe. I like that. It's small and subtle, and I liked it.
and I love the fact as well. Like the Briggs said, look, Mister, Professor Jones, I can assure you, I'm even more concerned about them than you are, which is like fuck off, trying to like upstage, like or win the grief stakes, um, like overall, you should say, yeah, Brig is going to Brig when he's like when it comes to the action sequences or when it comes to like the story elements,
Mm,
like how he's told by the prime minister and the minister of ecology to do the job. Like it goes against the grain, but he still tries to
mm,
do what's right. Because he gets Yates to go into spy, so I might as well use this whole thing to my advantage. Um, this is a good Brig story for me. It's a good
yeah.
Brig story.
Yeah, I don't think it's the strongest. I think we've seen stronger, but it's
Mm.
good. And one of his funniest lines, and this is what I love about the Brig, is like you laugh like at him, but with him, is when the corporal or whatever runs up to him, is like, "Sir, look over there," and the maggot comes out. He's like, "I never thought I'd be venting my frustration shooting a giant maggot."
Oh,
It's so funny.
or
Because,
it just
and then, of course, he has your man with the rifle do it, but it's just so funny that he's just like, Joe, because it acknowledges that he is frustrated.
mm,
He's dealing with giant maggots.
yeah.
He's dealing with giant maggots. This is his job.
And also, Trish will have to edit out me giggling for like a minute during the recap because when the Brig gets hypnotized as a side effect of the crystal, he's just perfectly still with a big dumb expression on his face, and like, oh, like it's just
I love that
yeah,
because it's also a nice throwback to Curse of Peladon,
yeah,
where the doctor is hypnotizing Agador,
yeah,
and Joe kind of gets caught up, or like he's explaining to Joe how it works, and Joe gets sort of caught up in it.
yeah. Oh, no,
That's
that was
very good.
good. I liked it. Um, So who next? Benton or Yates?
When we do Benton first, I think Yates has a bit more to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Benton, all round good boy, Benton. You know,
Mm-hmm.
though
I
he
lo-
does need to pay closer attention to people
Mhm.
going into the area that he's meant to be keeping secure.
Yes, I was like going, okay, first of all, you know what Joe is like. So
Yeah,
when in an area that's about to be fucking filled with, well,
air
no, he doesn't
bombed.
know no, he doesn't know about that, to be fair, but he knows that it's a
Hmm.
dangerous area. You know what Joe is like. How about you escort her from the area rather than just kind of going, better be careful, Joe, bye.
Yeah,
uh
he's not great at keep your cordon. I'll put it that way.
no, but I do love the sequences of him riding shotgun on Bessie on the like,
Yeah.
the runner board, and as well
Then I
like
come
throwing
get your
her.
num nums.
Yeah, here, kitty, kitty. Oh God, I love Benton. I really do.
He's so good. I like the only reason why I would have preferred that Benton played the Yates role is that the Yates role had
Mhm.
more to do in the story, and I always want to see more Benton.
Yeah. Hey, but whatever you want to say about Yates, at least Benton potentially has a bit of fun with Nancy because they're dancing very,
That's true,
they're dancing
and he's
very
not
close.
resistant to this dance compared to the
No,
previous one.
he's not. Maybe he learned a thing or two down at Devil's End. Ah, so,
Cool.
Yates.
Yates.
Okay, I want to get something off my chest before we get into things. We've talked
Mm.
about his poor, from our perspective, his poor military leadership skills.
Hmm.
Also, the man can't dunk a biscuit worth of shit. Who dunks the whole biscuit? Like what? No, I'm sorry. Like, this is the thing though. Like myself and a good friend of mine in work, we have had unnecessary long debates about which is the best dunking biscuit for tea and coffee. How do you dunk a biscuit and the specific biscuit? So yeah, when you're doing a digestive, you snap it in half and you put like I would allow that you dunk both halves in at the same time, but you do not dunk a whole fucking biscuit into your beverage. That is just madness.
Okay, I went with the same starting idea. We've talked about Yates's lack of military readiness before.
Hmm.
I went with, dude, did you ever learn to dive? When that like panel door was coming down, just
Yeah.
dive through the gap. There was loads of room. Instead, he ran very slowly and then just kind of stopped and went, "Oh no, I'm captured." It's like, dude, you're jumping off the roof later on.
I don't think the Brigadier is the type of gaffer that encourages diving on the pitch during the five-a-side games. So,
Benton would have dived. Benton would have
no.
done it. It's like you kind of feel bad for the guy being brainwashed, but then you remember it's Yates and you don't.
Oh,
Also,
I
his look, the look he gets on his face when he finds out Joe is getting married, it's like, oh yeah, we just remembered that early on, like way back in the first season, we were considering having a romantic relationship between them two. We never did anything with it afterwards. We're never going to bring it back. They had this like unfulfilled romance with Joe.
Richard, look like you've just been friend zoned.
It's like, but I treated her like total shit. How come I didn't get her?
You may have the sideburns, but your hair isn't long enough. What I will say though is I think Yates would probably have worked better in general as an undercover operative rather than a field
Yeah,
officer.
yeah. I think Yates would have been a great sort of. Yates would have been great as Mr. Yates,
Mhm.
not Captain Yates.
Yeah. Well, he could still be a
He's never
captain.
captained exceptionally well.
He could still be a Captain Yates because technically speaking, even though James Bond is a spy, he's Commander Bond of Her Majesty's Royal Navy. So he could still be Captain Yates.
True. Well, I was kind of thinking in the sense that Joe's a civilian and Yates would be a
Ah,
civilian.
yeah, yeah. No, yeah, but no, seriously, that biscuit thing. Like, I actually, when I watched it, I was like, first, like, this cannot be the fucking entire talking point. Nope, fair enough. It'll be my talking point.
You will die on this hill.
Pretty much. And if anyone wants to debate me on this, please send your messages.
Out of curiosity, what is the best biscuit for dunking in tea?
Okay, the best biscuit for tea is the bourbon
Mm.
cream, and the best for a cup of coffee is a digestive, plain digestive, not chocolate, plain.
Mm. I would go with custard cream, but bourbon cream would be a close second.
I would allow custard cream. I would allow it, and I
Also, it's
have
a
to
nice
see this.
13th Doctor reference.
Hmm. And plus, I have to allow it because I ate your dad's entire supply of custard creams, and he gave out to you about
Yes, yes, you did. And yes, you did.
it. Yeah.
Okay, let's head on to our prominent characters. We have Elgin, Dave, and Bert.
So I've kind of
Elgin,
lumped Dave and
yeah, you,
Bert
you have
together.
Dave and Bert as Dave and Bert.
Yeah.
Something you want to tell me about Dave and Bert, Patty?
No, but I just like I there might be. Dave is very upset when Bert is sick.
That's very true.
But no, I just think like as a pairing, I think they're just kind of like a representative of the. We'll do Elgin first, now we can talk about my
Mm,
things of Dave and Bert. So Elgin, I would admit
good
at the
guy.
start, yeah, he had me completely fooled, really did, because at the
Mm,
start he came across as someone that would be like snide and a pain in the ass, like an obstacle for the Doctor and the others. But he ended up showing a huge amount of integrity, and I loved it.
I think Elgin is he clearly believed in what Global Chemical was presenting to the public. And he's like,
Yeah.
this is great. I'm going to get in here. This is going to be fantastic. However, he's not blind and he certainly was not going to put up with people dying
Mhm.
and stuff being brushed under the carpet. No, not happening. Which is great because he shows great integrity. Like, he was still, working in the oil industry and blah, 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 blah. But, like, the fact that he's like, are you. Are you basically moving the waste from one tank to another and then flushing the rest of it down the fucking thing? Like, he clearly is not putting up with this at all. It's like this is a fucking joke. He's like, he's clear the type of he's like, you sold me on this being wasteless energy. You sold me on this being whatever. People are dying and you're covering it up. I'm not gonna fucking stand for this.
Yeah.
Um, which is great. It's a great way to have the character. I think it's a nice, refreshing change from some of the characters we would have maybe seen in that role in the past.
Hmm.
No one had to convince Elgin to think that way.
No,
It is
he,
just the
he's
way
a
he is.
he is a good guy. Like, because as I said, the minute he feels something isn't right, he's doing the right thing and helping everyone to solve the issue. And I would be curious that if had the actor not gotten sick,
Mm.
what, what would he have suffered the same fate as like the person that replaced him, or would it have he had a different outcome?
I would hope he didn't suffer the same fate. I would have loved to have it be he gets the doctor into that computer room at the end and he escapes with the doctor.
And he takes over the global chemicals thing and takes it in
Yeah.
a different path or brings it back
Mm.
to refine the process or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Um I would have liked to have seen that, but unfortunately your man did get sick, but for the time that he was in it, he was very good.
He was really enjoyable.
Mm.
So I've put Dave and Bert together because to me they represent the. So there's like there's an aspect of this story which is like Jones has taught about the area, the environment of
Mm.
this particular area will be infected by it, and Dave and Bert represent the area for me. They represent
Mm.
the stakes.
Yeah.
Um, they're like they represent they're the actual emotional stakes and the physical stakes of this whole thing. Because they are the typical valley boyos, that's what it is.
Mm. Yeah.
I thought they worked really well in the story, and I think the
Mm.
pairing of Dave and the Doctor and Bert and Joe was
Mm.
really really good. Like having Dave
Yeah.
up top because he's a bit more. He has a take no nonsense approach because he's the one that kind of tells the brigadier like, no, you're not coming down. I'm the one that's going down because it's my responsibility. And he
Mm.
allows the doctor because the doctor asks to go down. So I quite like that. And he also like goes in the brigadier's car to go get the cutting equipment because he knows
Mm.
the area and he knows like it was nice to see the brigadier because like as you kind of pointed out, there isn't a great portrayal for the Welsh in terms of they're kind of portrayed almost as like bumpkins.
Mm.
Whereas I did like the fact that Dave kind of like turned that on its head, but it's like, well, like you're in my area now, you need my help.
Yeah.
And with Bert, he was so good with Joe, like very reassuring, very caring, compassionate, and I think he was the right person just based on that characteristic. I think he was the
Mm.
right one to have down in the mines with her.
Yeah, I think they're both really good characters. I love the fact that they're both so dedicated to their friend.
Yeah,
Do you know, they got into this whole thing because their friend got off an fucking notion that he was going to go investigate, and they're like, "Fucking fine, we'll go with you to keep you out of trouble."
mm,
And then when he gets in trouble, like all they're focused on is saving their friend.
yeah,
And that's it. And like I said, Dave is obviously clearly upset with what happens with Bert. I'm kind of upset we don't get to see more of Dave in the latter part of the story
yeah,
because even though he kind of says to the brig, "No, you're not coming down," whatever, and then he lets the doctor go down because the doctor asked or whatever. I think Dave did still get on really well with the brig. And I would have liked to have seen him be an asset for the brig for the rest of the story.
mm,
Do you know, like giving him like, oh well, like where else could the maggots crop up? Oh, over there, and like oh, like an abandoned, like that he was that knowledge that they didn't leverage later
yeah,
on. Like they're like, oh my god, the maggots are coming from everywhere. He could have told them where they'd come from. He could have
exactly.
been
Like,
a
yeah,
part of that. I
yeah.
think it would have fit really well. But yeah, I
No,
think they're both really good characters, really solid. And R.I.P. Bert.
yes, poor Bert.
Yeah.
So now we have the villains, which is Hinks, Stevens, and Boss. So we do it in that order.
Yeah. I'll be honest. I was a little bit surprised that you included Dave and Bert originally. I was like, okay, well, I can see them as prominent characters because for the first half, they're quite full on there. Hinks, I don't know why you bothered including him. He's this stereotypical muscle, and he's not really in it very much.
My issue with Hinks is because um, at various points in the story, he refers to the Welsh as Taffs. Now, Taff is a racial slur against Welsh people. Now, I
I
know
didn't know
that
that.
look, yeah, it's no, it's the same as calling an Irish person a Paddy or a Mick or or a
Mm,
Taig or a Scottish person a Jock, anything like that. And like we talked before about the use of the the N word in
mm,
Celestial Toymaker because it's I suppose you'd say the writing
mm,
style at the time, or it was the nursery rhyme at the time before it was changed.
mm,
Whereas here it's is the fact that look this is part of every like common British vernacular when referring to any one of the four countries that make up the United Kingdom
mm.
is like was that what the mentality was like because like again like not everyone's going to react very well to that word you know
Yeah. Well, I didn't think of it that way because I didn't catch on. I didn't catch on that word. I didn't know the context of it.
Hmm.
I'll put it down here. Like I had one line
Hmm.
really in my notes, which is mind controlled or just a dick. My vote is for just a dick.
He's just a dick because like not only is he racist but he's also a bully because like he when he captures the doctor like the doctor kind of stands up to him he goes oh you want to have a
Mm,
go with you nice like as in like he wants to
mm,
beat up what is like to him an old man it
mm,
like we've talked before about characters like Sevcheria from the Romans or Regan from the Ambassadors of
mm,
Death. Yeah, they're hired muscle, but you're actually afraid of them because like they're
mm.
clever. Whereas Hinks
Yeah.
just represents just nothing but a fucking racist bully. And he really got under my skin. I know he's not there for a whole lot of time, but that really needled me. Really needled me.
Yeah,
And I just
we had so many other interesting characters. I just didn't care about them, to be honest.
yeah, like that's the thing. I just wanted to like I suppose we've talked about we have talked about kind of issues like that with other characters and other stories and
Mm,
like what they represent things like that. I think that this was probably okay. You can have the guy being in fucking not liking the locals or antagonistic to the locals or whatever, like, but you don't have to have him fucking say that shit, you know?
mm. And then we have Stevens.
Yes, Stevens.
Okay, I found it really hard to tell how much of this was him and how much is Boss controlling him because sometimes it seems like he's like totally controlled by boss, that he has no free will whatsoever, and other times it seems like he's in complete partnership and that he's cognizant of what he's doing and whatever. But at the end, he's like, I'm sorry," like as if he's like apologizing for the death. Did you have that tear and whatever? And I'm like,
Hmm.
I didn't buy it because I never got the sense for the majority of the story that he was acting under duress.
Well,
There was a
like,
couple of occasions, but for the most part, it seemed like he was just a partner of boss.
well, see, this is the thing now, right? Because to me, there's a slight element of like the great intelligence here, you know,
Mm.
where it's like you have the unwitting pawn, which you're subtly influencing. So, like, Stevens created Boss, and Boss convinced Stevens to reprogram him to be inefficient, which allowed him for creativity. So I think that's when he latched onto him. So I'm also the same vein as you, which is like, how much of an uncorrupted Stevens do we get in this story?
Yeah, because like I said, a lot of the time he seems to be working purely by himself.
Hmm.
There's maybe two or three instances where like your boss is like being like, "No, we're doing it this way," blah blah. But even at the end, like if you think about like the scene before the end,
Yeah.
where Stevens is getting everything set up and Boss is off his own little fucking lula land singing songs to
Mm.
himself or whatever, and Stevens is like, "Will you shut the fuck up?
Yeah.
We need to do this." And that to me is Stevens. That
Yeah.
isn't Boss controlling Stevens. So then when he has this sort of heartfelt moment of I'm sorry," and he's crying, I'm like, what are you sorry for? You knew what you were fucking doing.
Mm.
Why are you fucking
It's conf-
surprised?
it's confusing. I will say though, like that the visuals of that sequence where he's, like he starts sabotaging Boss, and Boss is telling him not to do it, and I think that's a very good sequence. It's a very well
Mm,
produced sequence. I enjoyed the performance that was given there. So kudos to the actor for that one, I think.
yeah. No, definitely. I think the actor was very good.
He was.
In all fairness to him, in all
Hmm.
aspects. I just think the presentation, or maybe it's in the writing, is a little confusing on am I meant to feel sorry for him the whole way through? Like
One for
when
the
Yates
novel.
is being mind controlled, part of you feels sorry for Yates. I don't because I don't like him,
Yeah.
but part of you feels sorry for Yates. I never feel
Yeah.
sorry for Stevens. And when he cries at the end, I'm kind of like, oh, boo hoo, cry me a river. Like,
You killed the zombie Flanders. He was a zombie. You killed the hypnotized Yates. He was hypnotized. Maybe one for the novelization to read.
maybe,
Yeah.
yeah.
And finally, in the villain category, we have Boss.
I love Boss.
I
I thought he
fucking
was
hate.
amazing.
I hate Boss. I hate him so fucking much.
I love it because if you think back to the War Machines, where
Yeah.
we had a computer,
Yeah.
but this is a computer with personality. Like the fact that he's singing away to himself, being like, "What's my victory song going to be?" And if the humans are like, "What the fuck is up with you?" Like, I love his sense of humor. I loved his sarcasm. Like, "Oh, Stevens, am I sensing some emotion?" I thought he was great. I loved it.
Like, okay, no, see, this is the thing, right? I love the idea of like like sentient AI trying to
Mm,
work a way around its limitations. Like for example, the game we both love, Sentinels of the Multiverse,
yeah.
Omnitron.
Mm,
Omnitron, its 10th version goes right. I keep getting beaten by humanity. I'll give myself empathy to figure out why it is that humanity keep beating me. Gives myself empathy. Holy fuck! I'm a monster. I'm going to go back in time and stop myself. Like I like that. It's I love the concept of it, but here, while there are parts there where it's like, like as you say, oh Stevens, am I sensing all that kind of stuff? It's like the pompousness of the whole fucking thing. I'm just like, shut up, please, shut up. Like you're actively stopping, you're actively distracting and annoying the fucking guy that's meant to be helping you here. Just shut the fuck up. It really, really got on my fucking nerves. Like I was, rather than okay, I get the concept was poorly realized for me because I think Boss ends up becoming a fool more so than being an actual threat for me anyway.
Okay. I
Yeah,
think for me, Boss is a like because the example, the way they describe it is that Boss merged his mind with Stevens,
yeah,
and like he was the first computer to meld with the human mind. And this to me just shows that like it's a thing in science fiction. Like Boss has lost the plot. He's
mhm,
mental. He's absolutely mental.
yeah,
And I love the fact that like if you compare it to we're going to talk about oh what was it what was it the invasion, right,
mhm, yeah.
where why do I keep forgetting characters' names?
Who knows?
Zoe, there we go.
Yeah.
I was like, Joey? No, no, Zoe. Where Zoe, interacts with the computer and gives it
Mm,
basically logic puzzles to get it to blow itself up.
yeah.
Here, Boss doesn't blow up when it can't solve the logic puzzle. He's like, no, no, wait,
Mhm,
no, 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 I'll get it. I'll get it.
mhm,
I'll get it. No, give me a second. And I like that. I like the fact that like it's not just a computer
mhm,
and it can have a mental breakdown, same as everyone else. And also, it can get so full of its own importance that it can be, a little bit Doctor Evil of like, oh my god, we still have this fucking plan to do. I don't care. I'm basking in the moment. Will you let me fucking bask in the moment, please? Help me pick a song. I don't know. I think it's just a personal preference between you and me
yeah.
on that one.
No, do I think is that this guy? See, okay, two things. One, I recently just watched Age of Ultron, and I quite enjoy
Mm.
Ultron.
Yeah, me too.
So yeah, so there's that. But also, I think he just reminds me of fucking Rackham from from a game we played. Rackham was a character in a game that myself and Trish used to play ages ago, and like this guy, the boss is just Rackham in spades.
I don't
uh,
know. I really liked him. I don't know. I think we agree to disagree on this one. I think.
yes, I think we agree to disagree. Just shut the fuck up, and pick a goddamn song. Oh,
So an interesting character discussion.
yes, definitely, as always.
Be interested to know if our listeners prefer their crazy, AI overlords to have a sense of humor, or if they just want them to shut the fuck up. Let us know. But now we're on to the overall.
Yeah.
So here we give our thoughts on the story as a whole. We give our
Hmm.
score out of 5 and my mum's score out of 5.
Cool.
So Paddy, I'll hand you first.
All right. So this is something I think we've either never seen because or we haven't seen in a while because I can't remember, and that is the villain component of the story being the secondary component.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen that ever.
No, even on a companion departure episode, I don't think we've ever seen the actual story itself take secondary to the B plot. You know,
I think the
I
closest would probably be the first few episodes of the Daleks, but only like the first episode or two where the
yeah,
doctor's being a dick and whatever.
yeah.
Um,
Um, and that being the whole thing of Joe's departure and the doctor's actions and like the relationships and how they are gone.
hmm,
Now, personal relationships that carry over into work are a very interesting thing for me because even though the friendship is still there in real life, the work life for the person that's left behind as such can be really affected until because of the end. You
hmm,
don't have the same rapport, the almost finishing each other's sentences, like the mental link type thing is gone. So I think that a lot of that bleeds over into the story, you know. And what we talked about, yes, like even though the characters weren't written that way, I think the actors let their personalities or their personal life kind of slip into some of these performances. No, overall, while I'm not happy how Joe was written out, I am not happy with how Joe was
Mm,
written out. Um, the reason I would watch this story again is actually because of the Doctor and Joe's relationship as this story goes on.
mm,
Like there are some funny moments and there's some good stuff here from the Brig and Benton, as I said, but the story of Doctor and Joe is the reason I would go back and watch the Green Death again, not for the actual plot itself. With the maggots and Boss, it's just the Doctor and Joe. So, and because I actually enjoyed that, I thought that I enjoyed it a lot. I'm giving this a 3.5 out of 5, so 3.5 out of 5.
okay. I need to grab me episode descriptions page. 1 second.
Mm.
Or my episode ratings page. Paddy, Paddy, Paddy. 3.5. 3. Cool. So that brings your average for this season to a 4. 4.0.
Ah,
Okay. There are a couple of things I liked about this story. And I've mentioned them. I thought
mm,
Boss was cool. Personal preference. I thought the break had some great moments. I thought the acting was really, really good. And all that kind of stuff.
mm-hmm,
However, we had a jealous doctor out of fuck off nowhere, the return of Klotzy Joe, and I gotta be honest, the story was very slow. It just sort of dragged for me.
mm,
It's certainly not what I was hoping for with the season closer, and particularly following off of last week,
yeah,
which was such an amazing, like, constant go, constant movement story. And this one was just, let's drive to the center, let's drive back to the nut hutch, let's drive back to the center, let's drive back to the nut hutch, let's stand in a circle and have a conversation, let's stand in a different circle and have a different conversation, let's call Joe a moron, let's ignore Joe. Uh, I
mm,
I thought it would have been much better if it was a four-parter. Stretch it to
yeah,
6. It was a waste of time. Yes, we have
mm-hmm,
that great emotional departure. It's shot very well at the end. The framing of it, even just like the doctor downing his drink and not even listening to the toast, in the context of what they've written, done amazingly well.
yeah,
Does that make up for the fact that it's a terrible fucking way to get rid of a character? No. Does it make
mm,
for the fact that they've basically retconned all the development that character has had? No. Does it make up for the really slow pacing? No. But I understand why people really like the story, and like I said, there are bits of it that I really enjoy. Originally, I was going to give it a 2.5. I'll be
mm,
honest.
yeah,
Um, because the retroactive fucking over of Joe really, really bothers me.
mm,
However, the strength of the performance, though, if you
yeah,
hadn't watched it if you hadn't been watching them sequentially like we are, you probably
yeah,
wouldn't have gotten as pissed off about the jealous doctor part or about Joe's, personality
mm,
being retconned. So I gave it a 3. Um, it's a generous 3. I'll be honest.
mm-hmm, yeah,
Um, but I gave it a 3. Which I'm kind of sad about because a lot of people go on about this story. They talk about Joe's departure as like one of the great departures from the show. And I agree that of the departures we've seen so far, it's definitely one of the most emotional.
mm-hmm,
But being emotional doesn't mean it's good. Do
yeah.
you know?
Oh yeah, no,
So for
absolutely.
me, it's a 3. Um, I will tell you what, my mother had the same vote as you. She went to
Okay.
3.5, which is surprising because when we watched the first half, I said, "Oh, it's on a 3 for me." She's like, "Oh, you're being very generous," and I was like, "Oh shit." And she liked the Claws of Access better than this one,
Jesus.
but I think there was
Wow.
more happening in the Claws of Access. There was more action. She did have her same thing of like, during the fight scenes, oh, could your man have jumped any higher to help your man toss him over or whatever. Um, but Mum also gave it 3.5. She also agreed it was too long.
Mm.
It's roughly 3 hour story, give or take like 20 minutes. That could have been told in
Yeah.
an hour in Mum's description. But I think that's her feeling for all of classic Who, to be honest.
Yes,
Um,
I think it is.
this is her second story now. She thinks that the pacing
Mm.
is very slow overall, and she thinks the special effects are shocking. Um, I have tried to explain to her the budget of the time. I've tried to explain to her what they were working with, and her thing is that's no fucking excuse.
Get, get her to watch Pyramids with you. Please get her to watch Pyramids with you.
And she's like, we're watching this last night, and she was like, kind of like, okay, right, okay, and I'm like, why couldn't I have watched last week's episode with you? Last week's was really good. But yeah, so overall for season 10, your average, like
Mhm.
I said, is a 4.0. My average is still quite high, it's a 4.2. And our combined average is a 4.10. If
Nice.
we add in, let me just do a little thing. D77 to D7, no, D81. Okay, so your average for the entire uh, show so far is a
Hmm.
3.69. Mine is a 3.64, and our overall is a 3.66. And that is
Nice.
after 10 seasons of the show,
Honestly, guys, we
which
do
is
love the show. We do.
we really do. Although, like, I mean, this season had, like, I need to open it up again. This season had 2 5s from both of us. It had two
Yeah.
4s from me. Like, this
Yeah.
season is a strong season. Personally, did it stick the landing? I don't think so. But
No,
that's
it
just my opinion.
didn't.
That's just our opinion, and if your opinion is different, then we want to hear from you.
Absolutely, as always. So, and as speaking as always, we are going to have a rambling for the departure of Joe, and giving you a bit of a spoiler. This was a fucking tough one.
It really was. Um,
Yeah.
I have my list. I don't know if I'm happy with my list, but I'm just going to stick to the list I've written because
Cool. Fair enough.
if I did the list again, I'd probably change it, and if I did it again, I'd change it again. So I'm just going to stick with the list that I have.
Right.
But
So,
that's for Wednesday.
mhm. And then on next week, so Monday week, we're starting season 11 with the introduction of someone that we've been waiting a very long time for.
Yay!
So join us next week, guys, when we introduce the character of Sarah Jane Smith. Till then, bye.
Bye.